Welcome to our second episode, or to the second episode of Candid Conversation with Rudy Sutherland and Rudy Sutherland. I am your host for the show, Rudy Sutherland, and I am a serial entrepreneur by occupation and a small business advocate by passion. My partner for the show, who also doubles as my father, is a retired corporate executive and a small business owner in his own right. And oh yeah, by the way, who just happens to also have very strong opinions about just about everything. And so without further ado, I'd like to bring Mr. Rudy Sutherland Sr. into the conversation. Mr. Sutherland, can you see me now?
Yes, I can. And hello, everyone.
Okay. All right. Well, we sincerely hope this is our political edition for this Labor Day, this 2015 Labor Day, and we certainly hope that everyone out there has had a very restful and eventful holiday. And so what we're going to talk about today are two topics. We're going to start with the Southwest part of the country, Texas to be specific, and we're going to discuss the prospect of Texas becoming a blue state as opposed to the deep red state that it currently is. And the impact that various variables are having on that probability being more greater than not. Then we're going to shift up northward in the country to the Midwest and discuss the current political issues around the controversial film that Spike Lee is currently recording in Chicago. And it's entitled CHIRAQ, which is a depiction, or is alleged to be a depiction, of Chicago being a war zone for all practical purposes. And we're going to discuss that and the ironies surrounding the fact that the plot of the movie has nothing to do with any of that. But that said, we'll get to that shortly. So without delay, I'd like to bring Mr. Sutherland back in. And Mr. Sutherland, if you could kindly tell us, you introduced this topic, by the way. And so I want to ask you what specific variables and what specific fundamental facts you would argue in defense of the state of Texas becoming blue in a certain time frame, and then of course explain to us what you think that time frame might be.
Okay. Point number one: population change. In the last 3 years, Texas have enjoyed a population explosion. Basically, the Asian Americans and Hispanics population has exploded. The number 2 point is what we call the cruise effect, which means that there is no conversation, no, how shall I say it, compromise. The number 3 point, the Texas politicians have gone so far right that I think the constituents of these politicians are starting to debate the problems that they're having in this state. And I predict between 2030 and 2040 that there will be a drastic change, possibly from red to blue.
Okay. Well, let me. I want to address the points that you made in the order that you made them, and give the counter argument. And what I think, I guess, not only the counter argument, but perhaps an argument that I think further substantiates or may substantiate what it is that you're alleging. So you're saying with Ted Cruz, the Ted Cruz effect. Essentially, what Ted Cruz has done is he has brought he's brought to the political climate of Texas a farther right perspective on conservatism than perhaps existed prior to him being elected. And let's not even confuse this at all. He was hired, if you will, by his constituents and put in office to be an obstructionist. The whole platform that he had, in essence, if you boiled that ocean down to a glass of water, Mr. Cruz said, listen, you put me in office, and I promise you, if President Obama says the sky is blue, I'm going to argue that it's red. Okay? You have my word on that. It doesn't matter how ludicrous the argument is. I'm going to make it. I'm your guy. Okay? So let's not confuse his rationale. And listen, it's a brilliant move on his part because let's face it. He recognized that the voting bloc, not the general populace of the state of Texas, right? Let's say the Republican populace of the state of Texas.
You're talking about the voting.
The folks that actually get out to vote. He recognized and dug into a note that said, you know what? This is, of the people that actually vote, this is what they want. And so he dialed into that, and kudos to him for doing it. Now, at the same time, that could come back to backfire on him. And the reason I say that is because to the same extent that he has done what he's done to rile up his base, he is also, I think, coalescing a base together on the Hispanic side. Because if you think about it, and we talked about these numbers. Okay, so look, let's go back to Mitt Romney's run. Mitt Romney ran, and he took Texas by 2 million Republican votes during their primary. Mitt Romney took Texas by 2 million votes. That was across the board. I'm sorry, not just the primary, but the general election. There are 2.2 million unregistered voters who are Hispanic, Black, and Asian. Okay, 2.2 million that are unregistered. And so you do the math. The situation that Mr. Cruz has created has and may serve as a catalyst to get those unregistered voters to register. And if that did happen, and they just, oh yeah, by the way, decide they wanted to vote Democratic, that could change the whole dynamic in places like Harris County and other places, Austin, Dallas, some of the other, larger metropolitan areas that have a large Hispanic population. And so I don't think that Republicans should be too, celebratory about Mr. Cruz's actions to date, particularly in the state of Texas, because it could turn around and backfire on him. Now, that said, at the same time,
don't forget about the Tea Party has lost some of its power in this state because of the same reason that you're mentioning.
Listen. That goes to my second point. I'm not. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Right. My second point is this. Okay. At the same time that this situation, this Ted Cruz situation, has created a proverbial hole up the middle, right, for a handoff to the running back to just run straight through, go for a touchdown. At the same time, you've got major issues that are middle of the road, right? Cross both aisles. Right, you've got huge droughts in the state of Texas. You've got deteriorating highways, and you've got a deplorable education system. All of which are issues that are shared by both the Republican the moderates on the Republican Party, as well as the moderates in the Democratic Party. So here's an area where the Democratic Party could actually reach across the aisle and get some support in lieu of the fanatic, right? So if you're middle of the road, if you're a moderate Republican, you're looking at Ted Cruz and saying, this guy does not represent my brand, okay? At least what I believe to be our brand of conservatism in the state of Texas. And so for that reason, I just might consider a more reasonable stance on the Democratic side if, in fact, they had these issues as their platform. But they're not. They're not producing these arguments anywhere. I don't see the Democratic Party in the state of Texas, and I've done a lot of reading since you brought up the issue to see, what are the primary issues of the Republican Party as opposed to the Democrat and vice versa. and I'm not seeing it. And so, as a consequence, that would lead me to believe that if the Democratic Party, certainly they can't expect that 2.2 million voters are going to immediately just jump into the fray. That's not going to happen, okay? But then secondly, they also cannot expect to win without recruiting some of the Republican base back over to their party, at least from an independent voting standpoint. Perhaps not making an argument for you to leave the Republican Party wholeheartedly, but it's not uncommon for Republicans to make a point to their own party to vote Democrat. But if you're going to do that, you've got to court them. It's like, you don't just knock on a woman's door and hey, come on out here, let's go. You got to bring flowers, you got to do things, you got to court her, to persuade her to perhaps give you an opportunity to make your arguments for why she should date you.
The Democratic Party here in Texas is rebuilding right as we speak because they had lost so much so quickly that to build it back up, they need leadership. And I cannot believe that I'm saying this, but the Democratic leadership is in San Antonio, Texas.
That's a good point. Listen. Now that's a show. That's another show. But you're absolutely right. It seems to me that the two brothers, they're in San Antonio. The twins, the one that's the congressional rep, and then I think the mayor of San Antonio. Right. These two cats are really doing some things, and a lot of their arguments, surprisingly, are moderate for both parties, from both parties' perspective. But that said, here's the thing. You were talking about that whole educational, with one, the Democratic Party is trying to rebuild. Two, it's trying to educate its base. The things and the mechanisms that are necessary to accomplish those stated goals, I just don't believe are in place. We've talked this. I don't believe that the conduits are in place to communicate with the totally disenfranchised individuals in the party that are claimed Democrats, but they don't vote. I mean, listen. Ted Cruz has proved it on the extreme side of his party that, listen, only the fanatics tend to vote. And the Democratic Party has done very little to expand the number of individuals that vote on its side. Now, here's what you got to double down on. There's a fundamental flaw in the go-forward strategy because what the Democratic Party in Texas can't bank on is the Obama effect. You got to remember that the last two election cycles were driven largely by Obama's ground team and their get-out-to-vote mechanism and the excitement amongst minorities that a minority was actually going to be in the White House. That dynamic may have gone, and I'm not sure that a Hillary Clinton or, say, a Bernie Sanders or a Joe Biden, if he decides to jump in, is going to create the same level of excitement, right? Because let's face it, Hillary Clinton is not exciting at all. I mean, she's about as run of the mill as politicians go. I'm not trying to throw in.
But JR, let me just say this. The Obama organization is still on the ground doing well.
What does that mean? They're on the ground doing well.
Again, I'm going to tell you what it means is while the Democratic Party is rebuilding, it is organizing, and it has this conduit to do it. But someone has to take over. And right. This is what I'm saying with the Democratic Party rebuilding, that the San Antonio effect may give it a big jump start. Let me just tell you one story. When I first started working for Obama, I went to an organization meeting.
Okay.
And there were more Hispanic and white people than it was black. And I'm sitting up there saying to myself, this is a black president. But I think what you have to understand is what was built from the ground up was built through Hispanic, white, and Asian Americans more so than say like blacks. And I thought that because it was a black president that it should have been more blacks there, but it never was.
Well, see, well, let me dip my toe into that pool. Look, first of all, a misnomer. When we say that the black vote goes to the Democratic Party by a 90 percentile rank, that's not voting. That's mindset. Because I think that we should only count those that actually vote. And if that were the case, you're talking about 3% or less of that 90% actually vote. So it's inconsequential, and that's the secret sauce. That's the skunk in the room that nobody wants to point out, is the fact that no one has figured out a formula, and that's where we go back to those communication conduits. The Democratic Party has to figure out a way to reach the disenfranchised politically, those that don't watch mainstream media, those that are not like us, political junkies, that type of thing, right? That nevertheless use social media and things of that nature, and give them a warm fuzzy about, hey, listen, I know you probably believe that your vote doesn't count, and from an electoral process perspective, it really probably doesn't that much. But symbolically it does, and you need to vote, because the threat of your vote gives us power. Now, that's it. I don't want to believe it.
Just say this. Let me just say this.
Okay.
The Democratic Party is reorganizing.
Okay.
That is one of the reasons why I am saying that by 2030, 2040, there's a possibility. Because right now, there is no leadership here in Texas.
No, there is definitely a leadership deficit on both sides of the aisle, and again, there's a huge vacuum waiting to be filled by somebody who can bring bring some level of intellectual capital that's reasonable, a reasonable umbrella to put shade over the mid portions of both parties. That's how the state moves forward. I just don't see a path forward with the current mechanism.
You just gave one.
You
just gave it.
No.
All you have to do. If someone organizes and
you know how hard that is. All you have to do. Listen, now these are simple statements. I know I'm making some simple statements, but I'm not deluded at all. Some of this stuff is walk on water, Moses type stuff. Okay, stick a rod in the water, and No, man, it's not. Listen, I think it's gonna be harder than we think. But listen to me. All right, I want to table that. All right, because we've got a limited amount of time, and I want to shift gears. Let's go straight up the middle, up I-55, hit 57, and land in Chicago. And here we are with CHIRAQ. Look, you and I both know that Chicago is a war zone. Let's call a spade a spade. It's a war zone. Death is rampant due to the fact that there are because of the isolated nature of the city. I mean, the South, most folks can't appreciate how truly segregated Chicago is by virtue of the way the neighborhoods are structured. The north side, pretty much 90% white. The south side, pretty much 90% black. The west side, mixture of black, Mexican, Hispanic, different brown, gray, whatever. And then as you move east, you've got the elite hodgepodge, more mixed, but again, that's where the money is. Okay, and then you've got the suburbs. And the suburbs, by the way, have become the melting pots of the city. Now, that said,
that's where all the jobs are.
That's where all the jobs are. So if you're stuck in the area that CHIRAQ depicts, right? What you have there is a whole lot of hopelessness, a whole lot of joblessness. You've got a lot of folks who have, for the most part, city jobs. I mean, if you think about it, the lion's share of the middle class on the south side of Chicago is driven by jobs, CTA,
bus drivers.
But I mean,
railroad.
Right. So I mean, it's not commerce, it's not the private sector that's driving it, and so as a consequence, you've got on the one hand the politicians saying, well, listen, we're keeping these folks employed because they're working here at the city, but what they're wanting us to do is sweep under the rug the fact that we know that depiction is true. Now, that said, you and I know as business guys that your brand matters and that it's a catch-22. You can't draw people in the city into a city that they believe that the assets they bring in are either going to be stolen, destroyed, right, or rendered incapacitated.
The growth in Chicago has always been the downtown area and the north side. Mm-hmm. That's where all the growth is. If you go around the city, downtown Chicago looks like Manhattan.
Right.
I mean,
right.
It has grown tremendously.
Right. Well, don't forget Lakeshore Drive.
As you go south, they sweep under the rug, as you say. Education, they have closed more schools on the south side. They have eliminated teachers, educational people, and they have used less monies to validate the south side. The only thing that is in the future that may change this whole dynamic is Obama's library.
Right.
If they build that library, when they build that library there, Chicago's going to have to take notice and change a few things and start putting some money out there. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But up until then, this CHIRAQ, I suggest people go see the movie. It has nothing to do.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. Oh, let's table that for me, because I just want to bring a couple of statistics to go back to the name. Then we can talk about the irony of the plot that drives this movie in the first place. But look, here's some statistics from June 1st to July 9th, when the CHIRAQ movie was primarily being shot. There were 331 people shot in the city, shot and wounded, and there were 69 murders. Now that's from July 1st to July. That's a little bit more, a very little bit more than 30-day time period. That's what you're looking at. Those were the statistics, and that's validated, okay, by public record. So I really don't think that the use of the name could be called what would you call that? What is it when you it's slanderous, or right? I mean, it's the truth. The truth can't be slander, right? And so I think that that Spike Lee has it spot on to keep the name there. And granted, we know that he's got that name in place because he's trying to drum up controversy and get the marketing
want to see a movie.
Right. He wants you to, hey, you don't make a movie because you don't want nobody to go see it, that type of thing. But that does bring into play the irony of the situation, that the plot of the movie is based on the Greek comedy Lysistrata, which essentially was, for those who don't know their history, was centered around a plot of the Greek women refusing to have sex with their husbands in an effort to bring an end to the Peloponnesian War, and via signing a peace treaty. And they basically said, both sides of the war said that they would not have sex with with the men that were fighting the war until they brought about peace. Now, what Spike is arguing, I would contend, and I haven't seen the movie, but I would contend that he's saying, listen, everything else that we've tried in resolving this matter hasn't worked, and so we need to think outside the box. And here's a suggestion for how we just might accomplish what politicians and police officers have not been able to, and that is to bring about peace in a more socially, more social. I don't know how to word this without going to X-rated setup.
Basically, what you're saying is to bring up the South Side community.
No, I think what he's making plight of. He's saying that, listen, you gotta appeal to these folks at a root level. It's a primal level. You take away the kitten for about a week. Things start hurting around there. Take away the kitten for about 2 weeks, maybe a month. You just might be in a position where some things are happening. Now, granted, here's what they don't have. You got to find a way to hide the women, because at some point our men, male primal instincts kick in, and we do strange things to get those primal needs met. So the women have got to be, if this were to play out, and this is all fantasy land, because it's a comedy. It's a comedy, and I think that we ought to reserve judgment on the movie and how it plays out until we actually see it, and then I think
Well,
we can make. Go ahead.
If you hear Spike talk about the movie, the thing that he is trying to get Chicago politicians to commit to is raise up the community, educate the people, give them a reason to not go bonkers every time something happens.
Maybe
these are the things that he's trying to bring to Chicago. He's trying to bring a positive with a negative.
I applaud his creativity in approach because this is about as left field as you could possibly come. Let me tell you something. I can guarantee that his movie is going to make, is going to be profitable. I don't doubt that, and I'm hoping that it strikes a dialogue because we got to be able to laugh at stuff. The comedians will tell you that, and comedians, by the way, have a tremendous amount of respect because it takes a lot of intellect to be funny.
Comedians cause plenty change.
Yes, because when you can get people if you can get people to laugh to see the situation from a comedic standpoint, sometimes that allows us to lower our guard enough to consider things in a way that without it lowers our defenses. And so it forces us to think about things from a calmer perspective, perhaps from a more reasonable perspective, and that's what we need. And so I applaud this. And let me just say this: I can't believe for a heartbeat that the all-star caliber staff or the actors and actresses that have signed up for this movie would have done so without having read a script that they know is a winner. And he's got some all-stars on that.
Yes, he does. He does. I think it's going to be one of the most interesting movies. Well, it's getting enough publicity.
For certain.
I bet you that first weekend, I think there's going to be an explosion. But see, what Chicago is afraid of, and always have been, was the name.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that might be. Now, listen, Chicago's a big boy city, and I really believe that even their part in this whole situation can be to help because they're participating financially in the movie, so they have incentive to create the controversy too. So I'm not calling out a conspiracy theory or anything like that, but I've got to believe.
Yes, you are.
But these are some very intelligent people. That run the city, and I have no doubt. I have no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind that somehow, some way, they recognize that all publicity is good publicity, and they're going to benefit one way or the other.
The biggest commodity in Chicago right now, in this time of year, is tourism.
Right.
They're getting plenty.
Yeah, and so there's some people. Listen, there's some people that are really. I mean, I think about the people that still go over to the Middle East as tourists, even though they know all this stuff going on. There are people that just got to be there. Call it fanaticism, whatever you want to call it, but somehow, some way, all the violence it tends to attract a certain caliber of individual tourist, and so they're going to get those too. But listen. We're running low on time. I want to get from you an idea of, so what are we talking about next? Give our audience a brief a primer on what you plan on having us talk about next.
Well, several things that are happening here in Texas, because we're talking about Texas right now. Mm-hmm. I want that theme to go even further because Texas have organized certain things like seceding from the Union, creating its own border patrol.
Yeah, that's one we've got to do. And don't give it away. Let's do some due diligence on that. But I really want to talk that border patrol situation that Texas is creating. Anyway, go ahead. What else?
And also, one of the things that you brought up, immigration. Mm-hmm. I think we're only going to deal with one part of the immigration, which I think affects here in Texas, and then we're going to spread out. But next week, I would like to subject Texas to a little bit more scrutiny.
Okay, enough said. Well, listen, we hope you guys have enjoyed the show. We will see you next week on Candid Conversation with Rudy Sutherland and Rudy Sutherland. And again, we hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your Labor Day holiday and have a productive week. Take care.